I'm really excited to be joined by Victoria McLean from Hanover City CV. And today we're going to be talking you through getting board ready, your NED portfolio career. So welcome, Victoria. I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute. So my name's Pete Healy. I'm the CEO of eFinancialCareers. So for those of you that don't know me, I've been the CEO for eFinancialCareers since 2021. I'm a board advisor for companies Get Optimal and Autometry. I'm really excited about today because as a CEO, I've hired multiple non-executive directors, board advisors. I personally am an advisor. I have a potential for or an ambition in my future to be an NED. And I'm also trying to support members of my senior leadership team in their own journey. So I'm an active participant today and really excited to take you through the content. For those of you that don't know eFinancialCareers, we're a global platform that supports financial institutions, recruiters aiming to tap into our global marketplace of talented and qualified finance professionals. So I'm going to welcome Victoria. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, Pete. Hi, everybody. Okay.
Yeah, let's get going.
Okay. So, yeah, welcome and thank you for the intro as well, Pete. So today I'm really excited. We've got lots of brilliant content to talk about ways that you can position yourself for an exciting new role as a non-exec, or really maybe to expand your portfolio for those that are already in non-exec roles. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of City CV. We're now Hanover City CV. And I'm also a board advisor for a couple of organisations. I'm also a mentor to women in banking and finance. But predominantly, I'm a careers expert. I've been involved in careers, personal branding, consulting, people empowerment for my entire career. I've worked in recruitment for many years also. I was at Goldman Sachs. I went on to lead a lot of the recruitment at Merrill Lynch. We were then Bank of America Merrill Lynch, a background steeped in financial services, but work very much now at that executive, non-exec level. And we work across the UK, EMEA, the emerging markets, the US, all over the globe, really. I love talking at events, at workshops, about all things career related. So that's a little bit about me. And for those of you who don't know Hanover City CV, we're about supporting organisations with their people throughout placement or search or leadership events. And also we work with individuals more with the City CV side to support them in their career through resume writing, CV writing and coaching and training. So that's just a little bit about us really before we get going. In terms of today, okay, so I would say with both of my hats on, whether I'm working with organisations or whether I'm working with individuals who engage us personally, I see a huge number of really outstanding, really high caliber candidates, executive, board, non-exec candidates who are not landing roles. So today, Pete and I are going to be talking through and chatting around why. Why aren't people getting the roles they should be getting? What's the root of the problem? What does a NED actually do? What is a board actually looking for? And how can we align your experience to promote you in the very best way? So together we're going to look at the importance of planning your board advisory career. And today is really that detailed tour, if you like, of the board advisory landscape, how your CV, your resume, your bio, your LinkedIn, your application fits into all of this. And we'll also wrap up by looking at headhunters. Hanover is an executive search firm after all. I'm really thinking about how you can work best with headhunters to move forward to fulfill your dreams when it comes to that board role and really take action.
So Victoria, you mentioned kind of challenges faced by NEDs or prospective NEDs as they try and pursue a portfolio career. I mean, what are some of the typical challenges that you have seen?
So there's a number, Pete, and I think it'd be nice to start with. I'm going to start with some of them now, and then we'll move on to look at one in particular a little bit later on when we start to explore what the different board roles might look like. So the average application to interview ratio is around 27 to 1. Okay, so if we think about what that really means to a candidate, that's 27 applications to get one interview. And actually, what that really means is that's the time and the effort wasted on 26 rejections. And I'm sure you've seen this as well, Pete, but like at every level, whether it's somebody junior or, looking for those board advisory roles, that rejection really impacts confidence. And I see it all the time with clients that come to us for help. So, the point being, we want to get that application spot on so you can get that ratio right down. Also, thinking about that, at the highest level, why is that happening? What is going on? So for me, I think the first challenge, and we can explore these in a bit more depth in a sec, the first challenge is a lack of understanding of the board role, a lack of understanding of the expectations of the board, not having a clear value proposition. So the value proposition, I guess, is a technical term, if you like, of the value that you would bring to a board and to that organisation. So really, really amazing candidates don't articulate that properly, so they're getting rejected even before they get to interview. I mean, I saw it a lot. I was a sort of a segue really, but when I was at Merrill Lynch before we became BAML, it was a global financial crash. There was all these amazing people in the market, and they were being beaten for the roles by, should we say, more compelling, less talented individuals. And it's the same with board roles. You can be an amazing candidate, but if you've not got a compelling story, you're going to get rejected. And the final challenge that I think we'll talk about a bit later is not being able to articulate your why you want to join that particular board. And a big part of what we do at Hanover City CV is guide clients, NEDs, as to how they can get through these challenges. To really get a strong value proposition, if you like. And I'll talk about all of these in a bit more depth now. Again, if you've got any input on these slides, Pete, feel free to jump in. So the first challenge really is the basics. I've looked at so many, tens of thousands of CVs in my life, and I would say the majority of NED CVs, particularly board advisory CVs, they miss the point because they're too similar to an executive CV. We write hundreds of board CVs every year. You've got to understand the target to write any resume. It's really important, and your LinkedIn has to balance as well. Particularly for many people are looking for an exec role and a NED role. How do you get the balance right on LinkedIn? How do you get the balance right on that letter of application? So as you're starting to build and grow your non-exec, your board advisory portfolio, as you start to think more and more about your value to a board, you've got to be really clear about the difference between your exec role and the NED role. It's definitely something we coach on. And Pete, you've probably seen this a lot with the NEDs that you hire as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes that you kind of start to see, where, someone's moving, maybe it's that first step into the kind of NED world, and they're so used to being an day by day kind of execution standpoint. What are some of the mistakes?
I think, it's a great question. If you think about the key differences, that's the obvious place to start, isn't it? Because execs, and that's the day job for so many people that we work with, they're doing the day-to-day, the critical decision-making, business operations, strategic, operational, commercial, financial viewpoints. So as an exec, you're still attending the board meetings, but you've got a much more hands-on approach to the active, and that's the word I think, the active decision making, in terms of how the organisation might move forward. So when you move to the non-exec, yes, you're still a board member, but it's slightly different because the word I would use is probably more passive in a way. You're not so hands-on involved. So as a board member, it's about I guess, a good governance that keeps the organisation on track. So the board members and the board advisors, as they'd be called in the US and NED in the UK, they are totally invested in the success of the organisation. And that might be in terms of shareholder value, or for many of you, it might be in terms of impact for a not-for-profit. So, it's about assurance, it's about good governance. And as we'll talk about later, some of these are paid quite well and some are not paid. But either way, it's about challenging and advising the executive team. And yes, still shaping that strategic direction, but thinking about it in a very different way. It's about remuneration, it's about risk, it's about the committees and mentoring and leadership. So to answer your question, it's just a different nuance in terms of the approach of how you would write your resume or how you would approach the interview. And actually not understanding that causes a real problem. And by the way, on that point, I would like to add, I don't think there's a limit as to how early you can start this, because whilst a lot of people think, you've got to be really experienced to be a non-exec, to be a board advisor, I think that hunger and an appetite for change are really, really important. And we're seeing more and more individuals who are maybe a little bit earlier in their career who are thinking, now's the time to take my career to that next level as a board advisor, because it actually really helps you become a better executive. So rather than thinking, right, I'm going to move now from being an exec to a NED, when you combine the two, it's a brilliant springboard, I would say, to growth, development, growing your networks, and some really exciting opportunities. So for me, I'm a really big advocate for starting early. The other challenge, if you like, is around understanding what the board is looking for. And again, this feeds back to your question, Pete, about the biggest mistake, because if you don't understand what the board's looking for, you're not going to get your application right. And this is, well, why would anyone want to hire me as a NED? Because yes, you need to have some good experience, but actually what's really important is your ability to work effectively as a member of that board. And it's about being, I've got a few words here that I'll flash up. So being an impartial, highly valued advisor. And I think the other thing that I see quite a lot is people that come to us and say, I don't really know, what do I bring? What I've seen is that boards generally look for probably 4 key things, and that's across the board as a whole. So a knowledge of a key professional discipline, really, really valuable. Let's say that might be law or finance or HR or whatever it might be. Expertise in governance, ambassadorial skill, and networks as part of that potentially, but also a connection with the organisation's main audiences. So if you're looking at a charity or you're looking at eFinancialCareers or different organisations, if the NED has got a connection with your audience, that makes a really big difference. So what I believe is that boards are made up, I mean, they have to be diverse in terms of specialism, which might be sector or function. I mentioned law and HR. It could be, fundraising or diversity and inclusion or transformation or digitization or any number of things. And a lot of people panic because they think they've got to have everything. But actually, you just need to have depth in 1 or 2 areas. And that can make you, an incredible non-exec board advisor. High emotional intelligence, really important. Ability to understand board dynamics. I'm sure you've seen this as well. Gravitas and the ability to challenge. It's the other thing that I hear a lot. You've got to be able to challenge and mediate and deal with conflict and hopefully achieve a bit of consensus. But that challenge piece, that courage to stand up to the exco and to stand up for the best interests of the organisation is super important. And also the ability to look beyond the core day-to-day operations. When we're in an executive role, again, we're in it. We're sort of in it all the time. And actually, the NED is here, and they can be a bit more strategic at times and think longer term. So it's about being a guiding hand for those whose job it is to do it and to run the company on a daily basis. And this, I just pulled this image from the Institute of Directors. It's their competency framework, and it's quite interesting because it highlights a lot of the individual skills and knowledge and mindset that is needed by the board as a whole. And I'd say don't panic, nobody's perfect. You don't need to have everything, but I like this image because I think it gives a really useful insight into what a board's looking for, if you like, and how you can start to build that value proposition, that I mentioned at the beginning.
Just hearing you talk, Victoria,
Yeah.
because having gone through this process a couple of years ago where, I was selecting NEDs, both a chair and then kind of board advisors, that kind of piece around value proposition, actually, the individual I chose was really clear on the role of the chair in a way that others in the process who, to your point, equally had, really strong skills, and that wheel, they were very different, but it was actually the person who was able to articulate, the role of the chair and the difference between the role of the chair and someone who's sitting on the executive team really helped influence my decision. So I didn't have this framework when we went through that process, but it was really clear to me who the right person was, even though their skills were really quite evenly matched. So this is really interesting.
That's a really interesting point as well. It's so nice hearing it from from the other side, I would say. So thinking about each person that might be listening to this session, only by understanding the needs of the board, actually in the way that you just described, Pete, it's only by understanding those needs that you can articulate your value proposition. So again, that is the value that you bring to that particular board, and it's going to be different. Is it shareholder value? Is it about, I don't know, eradicating risk? Is it about the networks that you bring? Is it about transformational change? Is the organisation looking to expand into new markets? And is that something that you know about or have done before? But once they understand your value, they are going to be really, really keen to meet you. They're going to be keen to get you on their board. So getting all of that right underpins everything. It's your resume, it's your bio, it's your LinkedIn. Many board advisory roles require a supporting statement or a fairly substantial covering letter. It might be your interview, of course, as well. A board interview is different to a typical exec interview. And a really big part of what we do is, we're writers, we're coaches. So it's about figuring out your value. How can we make you distinctive? How can we articulate that? And how can we then get that on paper, online, in person at interview? So if you're planning on writing your resume yourself, give yourself proper time to do this. So we average 10 to 12 hours on a non-exec CV. That's not including everything else. And we do it all the time. So don't think it's something that you can just whiz off in the last, the 11th hour. It's hard. You've got to put proper time into it. And as we all know, we can procrastinate. It's very easy to push it down the to-do list. So make sure you've got all your marketing collateral up front, and also don't forget your online brand as well. What does Google tell me about you? Have a look and have a think. It's worth Googling yourself. Are there old bios online from places you worked in the past, for example? Is there anything out there that reflects the old you rather than the board you? Just think about your online presence. You've only got one, and any selection committee will do their due diligence. So just make sure that whatever is out there is the right thing for you. So really, this is about your value proposition. What do you bring? Because through your influence, through your gravitas, you can generate incredible value. You can have a real impact. You can bring about positive change. So it's worth thinking about these challenges and how you can overcome them before you really get going.
So there's quite a lot involved. I mean, how important in this process is planning? in order to create success?
It's really important. So, the planning, I guess, initially involves the types of things that we've talked about here, doesn't it? In terms of just being really clear on what the board wants and what you bring, and what that value proposition piece is going to be different for each role that you go for. In my view, as an executive career coach, it's really important to figure out who your market is, who your audience is, before you even start writing your CV. So having that plan in place, what do you want your career path to look like, will give you that focus and will give you that direction. So I'm just going to talk you through, in my humble opinion, what that might look like, Pete, because we do a lot of this through the coaching that we do. And partly it's, am I ready to become a non-exec? And if I am, how can I set out a bit of a pathway that will help me get to where I want to go? What's my expertise right now? Are there any gaps? What do I want my portfolio to look like in the future? What might the stepping stones look like to get me there? Am I confident enough yet to be on a big board where I've got to be doing lots of challenge? What's my skill set going to be? Might there be a gap in terms of where I could be and what that first role might look like? I've got a quote that I often use, which is, most people spend longer planning their next holiday than they do their career. And we all often at uni would have planned our career and had career coaching and not really thought about it since then. So if this is your second or third career, what do you actually want it to look like? Because it could be another 15 years. So it's worth putting a plan in place. So what I would say is, whether you do it alone or you do it with me or my team, anytime you spend planning your career, which is so important, it's never time wasted. It's important, I would say, also for those that might be a newer NED. Like in your case, Pete, you've got a couple of board advisory roles, so you're really clear, and you both, don't you? You've got your exec role and your advisory roles. But a lot of people that haven't got that experience, they need to give themselves time to adjust from being a doer to being an advisor, and that is an aspect that is really commonly underestimated. So the planning for me focuses on getting maybe those smaller roles, which can then evolve into paid board advisory roles in more complex organizations. And then, as I'll show you a bit later, can continue to grow in terms of the income and the scope of the role as well. I would say for more experienced board advisors, that planning might focus on the ongoing rolling roles that might typify a non-exec career. But whether you're experienced or not experienced or somewhere in between, you've got to focus on that strategy and think about a plan to move up the ladder, to move up the value chain. And the other thing that I'd want to look at is what I call the must-haves. So the must-haves are the key criteria that any role you take must have to fit into your longer term plan. What are your motivations? What do you want that portfolio to look like in 10 years' time? And what kinds of roles will help you get there? So many people that I talk to, someone says, oh, you'd be great on our board, or have you thought about this? And they apply for it. And actually, it's great, but it's not, they might have a particular gap. Let's say they need more experience in governance or expansion to new markets or ESG or whatever it might be. They take that role, but it doesn't give them what they need to plug the gap to help them make the next step. So actually, it's all very well thinking, oh yeah, that sounds good, I'm quite interested in what they do, I'll do that. But the reality is it's a career, is it going to get you where you want to be? So crucially, it's about having a game plan, a strategic plan, and a route forward into that board world to move up the value chain. So it's about changing your mindset in a way. I don't know if you watched Ted Lasso. I'm a Ted Lasso fan, but you never step out into the football field without Coach Beard. Without a good coach or without having the right insight. And it's the same when it comes to your career. The same game plan. It's just a very different kind of a field. So whether you do it on your own or whether you get support, what you want from that is an insightful strategy that will help you move forward, will help you achieve it's that longer term goal, I think, and that's the planning piece, isn't it? We sometimes don't look that much further ahead. So do your research, think about your network, how you can expand that, how can you harness everything that you've got, and how can you reposition your experience from exec to NED to board, to reflect the needs of the board. So it's about having that framework, I would say, for support, and a plan as you move forward.
So for the viewers today, how practically might this impact kind of their CV or their next application process?
Obviously, I mean, as you know, Pete, a huge amount of my work is, we're a resume writing, a CV writing business originally. And so a huge part of what we do is helping individuals think about that online positioning. I'm always talking about it. So I'm going to talk you through how we would work with clients in this way so that individuals can then think about how they might apply that to themselves. So the way we do it, from a writing perspective, is through a really in-depth, 90-minute-ish, maybe a bit longer, consultation interview. But what we're trying to draw out in that interview, in that consultation, is who's your target audience? What value do you bring? So that's why that planning piece first is so important. Who am I targeting? And then how can I take elements, or how can we take elements of your experience in your career to date, but reframing that in the context of board advisory, non-exec demands. So the people that are viewing today will all fit into one of three categories. So either an experienced non-exec, maybe an executive or professional with no non-exec experience, but some board experience, or no board experience at all. And from our perspective, whatever category a client falls into, it's about summarizing, I guess, board appointments or top level achievements to demonstrate effectiveness at that really, really senior level to reflect the needs of the board. So what I would say is you don't have to limit it to formal board roles. So you can legitimately include subcommittees, committee memberships, any role that might have had a strategic or a governance perspective, any mentoring. There's all sorts of things that you can pull into this. And then as you start to think about your CV, your resume, um, I use those words interchangeably. Of course, those in the US call it a resume. It's really effectively the same thing. Thinking about your interview, what we need to think about also is good governance. How can we draw out your experience in those key areas to make it relevant in your board application? So it's about having a really big brainstorm through any advisory or executive experience and reframing that. So in that initial brainstorm, if you're doing it on your own or with us, be specific and actually support any statements you might make with evidence. So for example, how did the organization change over the period that you were there or that you sat on the board, and how did you contribute to that? Because boards steer strategy, they oversee management, but they are not getting involved in the day-to-day operations. So having that brainstorm will help ensure that all of your documents highlight the board relevant skills and achievements and convey sufficient authority. Remembering the focus is on the expertise you will add to the board, not on your career trajectory. So yes, we need to pull out corporate ethical governance, risk, commercial strategy, talent, compensation, that type of thing. So for all of your marketing collateral, what we want to do is take your executive experience and transfer it from the active to the passive, really, or strategic, if you like, to reflect that change in focus. And the key really is to sell yourself. Even I think for the more established board advisors that we work with, the NEDs we work with, it can be really daunting to set out your non-exec brand for the first time. And I'll just add, before I go on to the next slide, but when you're thinking about your non-exec CV specifically, a lot of people will think, oh, well, I'll just pop any board experience at the top. But what they're forgetting about is that all of their executive experience needs to be changed as well, because we're not hiring you because you're a brilliant exec. We need to make that executive experience more strategic and more advisory, so it sort of all aligns. So I can't reiterate enough, I suppose, how important it is to tailor every CV. And yes, you need a different non-exec CV, of course, but equally within your non-exec CVs, you might have a few different versions. You might have one for, and we often will write portfolios of CVs, but one might be for a trustee and a charity, one might be for the public sector, one might be for financial services, one might be for something else. So they're not going to be massively different, but they will definitely be subtly different, and you do need to tailor it each time. What we forget is that recruiters are not going to trawl through everything you've ever done in your career looking for relevant skills. Good roles will attract a lot of competition. So we've got to make it really easy for those recruiters. So thinking about that CV, recruiters, I say they don't read your CV. I mean, of course, they are kind of reading it, but what they're really doing is comparing it. They're looking at they're comparing it to the one they just looked at and the one they're about to look at. So that's why it's got to be better than everybody else's. And as they're scanning it really quickly, they are thinking, is it better than that one? So how can it be the best? And that's why it's so important to get it absolutely perfect every time, because we've got to give the board the confidence in your authority, your organizational fit, and the value that you bring to the boardroom dynamic. And of course, I mean, I've talked about the three different kinds of fields you might fit into, whether you're experienced or not experienced or half experienced. The layout of your CV will also depend on where you fit into that scale, that continuum. It's going to vary. What we know about CVs, and obviously you're really experienced in this area as well, is that it can be really hard to get onto the shortlist of any role, any job. But the best non-exec roles, and particularly the well-paid ones, they're very competitive. You've really got to think carefully about this. Your non-exec, your board advisory CV is probably going to be your make or break for your audience. They're going to scan it in a few seconds. Your strategy's got to be right. How can you implicitly sell yourself every step of the way? So I'm going to ask you a question, Pete, actually. Have you got a non-exec CV at the moment?
Me? Do you know what?
Yeah.
I don't actually.
Yeah.
And I have to admit that the yeah, it's all been through network so
Right.
far, and so yeah, I don't actually. Full
Right. Yeah.
disclosure. Yeah.
I mean, I recently did mine, but the two board advisory roles I've got, again, they came through networks. It's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? You know, that is definitely where the majority of those types of roles do come from.
And I do, when I think about my own experience, I mean, we used for our chair, we used a headhunter, like yourselves, and then for some of the board advisories, you know, it was through network then, so it was a combination of headhunting or. And so I can understand that 27-1, because when you are hiring onto your board, you know, advisor is one thing, but someone who has a vote, that's a really big decision, and trust is going to be huge. So I can see why those numbers of 27-1 are where they are.
Yeah, and for some people it's much worse than that, the ratio,
Yeah.
right? You know, other
Yeah.
people, when they get it right, it can be lower. So yeah, that's really interesting. So I've got a few tips specifically on the CV. And the first one is around keywords. Obviously, bearing in mind eFinancialCareers, you're very, very familiar with keywords at the back end of your platform. A lot of people think, oh, you know, they're not important at the level that I'm at. They're really important at the more junior level, but they're really important in your non-exec CV, because however you go about this hunt, ultimately, when you are headhunted, your CV will end up on the database of that recruitment firm. And every, or 99.999% of search firms and recruitment firms have some form of applicant tracking system, which is simply the word for the recruitment database. And what that means is that in the future, if they're ever looking for a board advisor, a NED, or an exec, they will go into their database and they will search using keywords. And a lot of people think, oh, at that level it's not important, but it is important. It's important at every level. Not only that, but for the human eye, as a human is scanning your resume, the right keywords will almost leap out of the page at them. So we want to get you through to the next round. It's a really big part of our role, obviously, as board, as executive CV writers. What are the right keywords for you? They're different for everybody. And how can we get them naturally, subtly on the page? Because it's really critical to get through that screening, making sure that they are the words are not only in the CV, but in the right place as well. Few other tips from me is to have a headline. So the headline would be title, basically, immediately below your name and your contact details. Headline might be non-exec director or CEO. We know that the recruiter's scanning quickly. We're really taking the advantage here of, I guess, confirmation bias. They're in a hurry. And it's a power of confirmation bias. How can we hit them hard? I am what you're looking for within the first few seconds of that short attention span of a very busy recruiter. So that headline, it should give a sense of credibility, a sense of your experience. If you have been a NED before, a board advisor before, say so for sure. But it's about aligning you with your target role in the mind of the recruiter. And then below that, you'll have your profile or your executive summary. I would say, and I've seen many, many CVs where the whole first page is skills or a really, really, very, very long profile. I would say no more than 25% of page one is your profile. And frequently, as we've discussed, very specific subject matter expertise can be a defining factor in the board's thinking. So address any relevant expertise as quickly as you can to make an early impact. And then it's about thinking, well, what's my unique selling proposition? What do I do better than most other people? How can I impact the bottom line? What specific examples can I illustrate this with? If you think about it, as with any CV, your board CV has to demonstrate a strengths toolkit, and you've got to prove it. So I always say we have to show, don't tell. So you'll normally be able to find on a normal job spec or advert, there will be a list of competencies under the candidate essential or candidate desirable. And what you need to do is include bite-sized anecdotes on your resume that show not just that you've done the job before, but that you've done it really well. And there are loads of different competencies. I obviously don't know what they're going to be without looking at a job spec, but I can give you a couple of ideas that we know are really common on a board CV. Think strategically about change. Often organizations, and particularly smaller ones, will look for a non-exec when there is change on the way. Your research will help you out here as well. If you're applying for a particular role, get online and do that research around the organization. But it could be a major growth opportunity. It could be moving into new markets. It could be something else. But again, mention that experience quite early on. That can be useful. We know, we mentioned already, leadership teams want a sounding board. They want a critical friend who can offer challenging, I keep using that word, but supportive but challenging guidance. So identifying that advisory competency early with achievements, again, always with an achievement, is quite useful. A collaboration and influence. So you've got to be able to collaborate with the leadership team and the board. So again, illustrate with examples early on your ability to build productive relationships. Maybe think about your biggest collaborative or influence related achievement. Can you include a couple? I like the R-STAR format. So you might be familiar with the STAR, which is the situation, task, action, results. Yeah. Really great for an interview. The R-STAR is when you start with a result at the beginning. So it might be in an interview scenario. You tell me, give an example of blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you about the time that we tripled revenue to blah, 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 blah. That's the R. And then you go on to the star. And that format can work really well in a resume where you start with a bit of an impact or a result, and then you explain what happened and how you did it with another result at the end. So the R star can work really nicely in a board CV. The other thing that's quite different from an exec CV is referees. So you wouldn't include those in an exec CV, but actually good referees, just the name and what they do, can influence the board when they're making an appointment. So if you've got any high profile board or chair level referees, include their name. We talked a bit about the applicant tracking systems already, format and style. We know that 99.999% of headhunters use some kind of database, ATS. You've got to be careful with your layout because some of them are not that sophisticated and won't be able to read the content in your CV, or there's certain formatting rules that you have to follow, should we say. Nothing too over the top or jazzy. It likes simplicity generally. And as I've already mentioned, and this is the last piece on this particular slide, Pete, don't forget to tailor your CV for every single role that you go for. The way I always think of it is that what we create is a master, like that perfect prototype, but they're going to be subtle changes for particular roles that you go for. It might be moving the bullet points or dropping in a particular word a bit more often. Tiny tweaks. So let's say you're going for a role where digital transformation is really important. You might want to move that bullet up or down, or chuck in a couple of keywords or whatever. So it's much easier to do once you've got that perfect master document to work from. That's quite a lot of information on the CV.
It's awesome though. I mean, and when you look at those ratios, you've got to do what you can to improve those ratios in your favor. So that's really great feedback. So going back to the start, the why, and I think a really important piece. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So we touched on, didn't we, at the beginning, why so many people failed, and that awful ratio of all those rejections. For me, and again, Pete, you might have seen this on the interviews that you've been doing for the NEDs and for your chair, is a lack of clarity around why an individual wants to be a board advisor, and not only not knowing, but also not being able to clearly articulate that, because that, I think, has to come through not just your marketing collateral, so your resume and letter if there is one, but also an interview. So this slide has just got a few whys on it that I thought it might be interesting to share. And I'd love everyone that's watching just to have a think about what your why might be. I'd like to add really, and a lot of people say to me it's about wanting to give back actually and make a bit of a difference. But for many people, it's around income. And whilst income isn't everybody's primary driver, some of the roles do pay quite well, which I'll show you on the next slide. But definitely we don't have to go through the unpaid route first. It is the preferred route for many, I would add. I've got one client in mind in particular who's an M&A lawyer, and she went from no board roles to two extremely well paid NED roles, very, very quickly, just by getting all these other bits right and having a really clear plan. And she just said, I'm not going to do it for free. So she was really, really clear. But also she had that functional expertise, which really helps as well, that we've already talked on. So when you market your value properly, it can be done. But the NED roles do attract a lot of attention. The paid non-exec roles particularly are really competitive. We can't just hope that I'm going to send my CV, my resume, I'm going to cross my fingers and wait for that interview invitation. If you believe you're a perfect fit for that role, you have to wow them, and that's probably going to be in your covering letter or your supporting statement. And you've got to wow them at interview with your why you're that perfect fit for them, what you bring, why that sector, why that organization, why that board, why those challenges. That why, it's really, I believe, got to leap out at them, I would say.
And if I can add something here from my own experience, again, that being really clear was so important in helping me feel comfortable, confident, trust. And it wasn't that I didn't trust the other candidates. It's just that because this didn't come through quite as clearly, I felt like, wow, when it came to, the motivation of that individual, when, we get into the meat of work needing to be done and conflicting priorities, I felt really confident and clear as to why this person was going to be really useful to me, really help me and the business, um, in a way that, again, it wasn't critical of the other individuals. It just removed anxiety or doubt from me. Um, and I think, as I reflect on my own experiences, it's all about, that trust that, when you're hiring someone into one of these really important positions on your board, um, you want to feel really clear and just remove any doubts. And again, it's not about saying that anyone that didn't get the role there was anything negative about them. It's just you're trying to mitigate any risk when you hire someone onto your board. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more on this point, and it really resonates with me, my own experiences. Really important, and I guess for for some people there, some people who are watching us today, kind of the thought of an NED role, at an organization, might seem out of reach, but there are different types of roles, and can we start to explore, I guess, some of the different paths in and the different paths that are available?
Yeah, and this next slide I think sums that up quite well. What I've got on here also is around what those roles are paying. Now, I appreciate that a lot of people watching aren't just in the UK, but these are obviously in pounds, so these are the latest UK figures, but I'm sure that you can equate those to other parts of the world. So the reason I quite like the way that I've laid this out is that you can see it as a career path. You can see that where you might want to start, for example, might be in a charity trustee type of role, which might be unpaid, or it might be advising a startup. Um, and it might start to grow. You might gain a bit of experience here and think, great, now I'm ready to do this. This is a very broad range, from 5K to 100K and sometimes more. But again, you can start to see how things fall into place. And a lot of these can be held alongside your executive role, or it might well be that you reach a tipping point where you think, now I have enough revenue coming, enough income coming in that I'm ready to make the jump, and actually I can earn more from my portfolio than perhaps I could as an executive. So it's really interesting to see how that grows, and everybody loves looking at this because it really provides some fairly compelling numbers actually,
Mm.
as well as you start to think about building that career and what that might look like. Thinking about running it concurrently to your executive career. So there was something in the Harvard Business Review that I read just a couple of months ago. And what that said was that executives who hold a board appointment in addition to their executive role earn 13% more than executives who don't. And they are 44% more likely to be promoted than their peers who don't. I mean, I think that is a fairly meaty statistic to think about when you're thinking, oh, am I ready for a non-exec role? Yes, you are, because it can really help your executive career. It's not about one or the other. Having said that, also, of course, if you're doing both, you're getting potentially that additional supplementary portfolio income in addition to your executive income. So there's all sorts of benefits to doing it, but it really gives you additional experience to make you better in your executive role. And you can see how it can range from expenses only, or maybe in a PE firm or a startup, it might be that you're an investing net potentially, and you might have some equity, so you've got a bit of skin in the game, up to 400K, or actually quite a lot more for some of those FTSE chair roles. So it's interesting. There's also this role here, which is a senior independent director role. So the SID is appointed to provide a sounding board for the chairman and to serve as almost an intermediary for the other directors when necessary. So that can be an interesting role to have as well. So I just thought this is quite a nice slide to start to get a flavour for the different roles and also to what they might be paying.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some great, if you're over in the US, some of those figures are significantly inflated as well. But yeah, I think, as I look, I'm kind of helping, as I've probably mentioned at the top, I'm helping members of my team. I'm a real advocate of them getting experience as non-execs or advisors, because I think it will just make them better executives. So yeah, having the confidence to, I guess, approach your own business to say you're looking to do this. I think most executives will understand that it should improve you in your current role as well, because I know that might be something that holds people back, a fear of, oh, am I going to be distracted? But it'll broaden your perspective and broaden your network, which should help your existing role. I totally agree. Thanks, Victoria. So I guess, finally, as Hanover is a search firm in the FS and NED space, have you got any advice for working with headhunters like yourselves in kind of taking that step?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can talk you through that now. So within Hanover specifically, we have the search piece, and then we've got my piece, which is the advisory piece. But I also sit on the board of the group. So got lots of experience on both sides, I would say. So here is just a few top tips, and it's worth reflecting, anyone that's watching, do you have good headhunter relationships in place? If you have, how did you get them? What makes them good? What did you do to nurture them actually? How did they become so good? And can you replicate that over and over again? Because most of the best NED roles are recruited through your network and through good headhunters. And often your network will include the headhunters. So build your networks, find a good headhunter that you like and that you trust. Don't forget the associate researchers as well. Got to nurture those relationships. They might be more junior. They hold much of the power. So to keep them on side, always return phone calls as quickly as you can. Even if you're not interested in the role, these are the networks that are worth nurturing. The more accessible you are, the more responsive you are, the more they're going to prioritize you in the future. I often talk, when I'm coaching, I often talk to people about being a hunter or an explorer. So the explorers are looking around. The hunters know exactly what they want and they're ready to place. So when you're talking to a recruiter or headhunter, don't just say, what have you got available? You wouldn't go to a real estate agent and say, oh, I'm looking for a house, what do you have? You'd be specific about what you want. So be clear about what you want. Be clear about why it appeals and the value that you can bring. And go with your gut. This is a two-way street. It's as much about you assessing the suitability of the role for you as it is for the headhunter to assess that you're right for that role. Does it meet your must-haves, your criteria? Is it right for you? Be totally honest. If it doesn't feel right, don't waste anyone's time. And be really confident in your ability, I would say. You are being considered because they believe you can add value as a NED. Don't think, oh, I haven't got the right experience. Oh, they don't really want me. They wouldn't be talking to you if they didn't think you could do it. So don't worry if you're early on that board journey. And remember, we've talked about this already in different ways today, but boards reflect the diversity of the communities that they serve. And most boards and most recruiters are absolutely committed to broadening the diversity of boards. You are being approached, if you're approached, because they believe you can do this. They're not approaching you because of your gender or your ethnicity or any other reason. It's about having the best people on the board. So be confident. If you're being approached, be confident in that. And remember also that diversity of specialism, diversity of functional expertise, diversity of broader expertise is really important. Diversity of thought. It's a genuine organizational need. that delivers results. And the final thing I'll say on this slide is it's never just a coffee. If people say, a headhunter recruiter says, oh, should we meet for a coffee? It's never just a coffee. You're always being interviewed. They're always checking you out. So it's never just a coffee and never just a drink. I know I've covered a lot, Pete. I'm going to do a really quick wrap up if that's okay. And then, what we've talked about is do your homework, understand what it is to be a board advisor, what the board needs, what's your value proposition, prepare your documents. You need a good board CV, a good bio. You need a really good interview pitch. Don't forget the planning again, that coaching potentially. What is my strategy? Where are there gaps? What do I want it to look like now and in the future? And network those relationships with other board members. Definitely connect with me and Pete, by the way. If we're not connected, we'd love to to be within your network for sure. And just prep and practice and think about that plan. That will help you seal the deal. And of course, ask me for help if you would like to know more. But just reflect on everything, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from any of you in the future.
Thanks very much. But yeah, I mean, just to finish off, if anyone is hoping to kind of engage with you, what's the best kind of step for them to take, Victoria?
Well, there's two ways that people can engage with me. So number one is, of course, as an individual. So what we do is we're engaged by individuals one-to-one to coach them. So what do I want that board portfolio to look like? Helping them get that first role. And we do all the writing. So it's not just a case of helping you with your resume or your CV. We do the whole thing for you. Starting with a blank canvas, 90-minute consultation, following which we create an incredible CV and maybe a letter if required or a bio. And then that coaching can support you on an ongoing basis to help you grow your portfolio. We're working with an individual at the moment who has just secured her 6th NED role. We helped her get her first one, and we're still working with her now, updating her CV, supporting her through coaching. So it's about, in fact, it's not about how good you are. It's about how well you market yourself to get the role that you desire and that you deserve. It's about getting your ROI. So our fees, again, we work across the US as well. We've got offices on the East Coast and the West Coast in the States, but these are our UK fees that they pretty much equate to dollars. You can see on the screen there. So whether that's for the writing or the coaching, there's lots that we do to work with you and to support you and get you the change that you want. From a B2B perspective, the two main areas would be our outplacement solution through layoffs, through redundancies, working at every level with really, really fantastic tailored programs of writing and coaching. And we run a lot of career programs. I do a lot of speaking at events, both in person and online, around all sorts of topics around careers and empowerment and getting board ready. And of course, we do the writing and the branding and coaching. So all sorts of different things that we do. Bit of a plug there from me, Pete. I hope that's all right. But anyone can contact me here. It's just victoria@citycv.com. That would be great. Great to connect.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks, Victoria. It's certainly been useful for me. There's been some great points for me to reflect on. I hope our audience have really gained some value, and as they're thinking about taking the next steps in what could be quite a daunting and challenging process, they're feeling a lot more empowered to move forward. So really appreciate your time today, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.